This is number seven podcast.
Number 7 podcast.
Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive? Today, we're going to be heading back to the 10th century.
Ooh, the 10th century. Yeah, we're going to be exploring the world through the eyes of this guy named Ahmed Ibn Fadlan.
Okay.
He was an Islamic scholar, and his writings give us this, rare glimpse into cultures that we wouldn't know much about otherwise.
You know what's really interesting about Ibn Fadlan? He wasn't just like some wandering historian or something.
Right.
He was actually on a diplomatic mission.
Oh, wow.
Sent by no less than the Abbasid Caliph of Baghdad.
Okay.
Al-Muqaddir.
Oh.
A powerful dude, right? To the king of Volga Bulgars.
Volga Bulgar.
A newly converted Islamic kingdom.
So this wasn't just a casual trip, huh? What was the point of this mission?
Well, it was multifaceted.
Okay.
First of all, he was tasked with instructing the Volga Bulgars in Islamic law and practices, overseeing the construction of a mosque, and even advising on bolstering their defenses.
So he was like a scholar, an architect, and a military strategist all rolled into one.
Yeah, basically. Man, that's impressive.
Imagine, going on this journey that combines all that stuff, right?
Yeah, that's a lot to handle.
Starting from, Baghdad.
Oh, wow.
Which was one of the greatest cities back then.
Right?
And traveling through Persia.
Wow.
Khwarazm, and then venturing into the territories of the Turks and the Rus.
Wow, that's a serious journey. I can't even imagine all the different people and places he must have seen.
Exactly. The cultural shifts, the encounters, it must have been incredible.
Yeah, and all that diversity.
And all documented.
So his writings must be amazing, right? Like a goldmine of information about this period.
They are. He provides all these details about the Volga Bulgars,
Okay.
their customs, their recent conversion to Islam, and their reasons for, wanting support from the Abbasid Caliphate.
That makes sense, yeah.
He also describes the Rus, who were basically Vikings, known for their seafaring.
Ooh, Vikings,
Yeah, their seafaring prowess and...
Hold on. Vikings, right? Like long boats and horn helmets.
Yeah, exactly. But they were also known for their, shall we say, unique hygiene practices.
Okay, so when you say unique, do you mean not so great?
Well, Ibn Fadlan was pretty blunt about it.
Oh, well.
He described them as the filthiest of all God's creatures.
Oh, wow. He didn't hold back.
Nope. He was particularly appalled by their communal bathing habits and their general lack of personal cleanliness.
Yeah, I guess our ideas of cleanliness have changed a bit since then.
A bit. It's a good reminder that what we consider normal can be totally different in other times and places, right?
Totally. It makes you appreciate modern plumbing, that's for sure.
For sure. But beyond the shock value, it gives us this valuable anthropological perspective.
I see what you mean. It's not just about being grossed out. It's about understanding them.
Right. It reminds us that our way of life is just one of many, and what we think is normal is often just our culture talking.
That's a great point. So we've got this scholar, right, venturing across these huge distances, immersing himself in these cultures. But there's one story from his journey that really stands out.
The giant.
Yeah, the giant.
Right. And not just any giant. This one was said to be from Gog&Magog.
Gog&Magog.
Names steeped in Islamic and Abrahamic traditions.
Okay.
Powerful, destructive forces associated with, the end of times.
Okay, now that's a story I want to hear more about. So how does this giant story even fit into Ibn Fadlan's account?
Well, picture this. Ibn Fadlan is hanging out with the king of the Volga Bulgars.
Okay.
When these merchants show up, totally freaked out.
What happened?
They claim they found the body of a giant washed up on the Volga River.
Hold on, a giant. Like a real giant.
That's what they said. And get this, the king confirms it.
He'd seen it too.
He told Ibn Fadlan he'd seen it alive.
Wow.
And get this, he described it as being 12 arm spans tall.
12 arm spans. How did they even measure that?
Yeah, he doesn't go into the specifics of that, unfortunately.
Okay.
But he does say the king kept the giant alive for a while.
He kept it alive.
Yeah, but he said it was dangerous, and eventually it died from some illness.
That's wild.
And then the king takes Ibn Fadlan to see the giant's remains.
Yeah, he kept the remains.
Apparently. He describes the skull as being as big as a beehive.
A beehive.
And ribs larger than palm tree trunks.
That's a huge beehive. Okay, so how does this connect to Gog and Magog?
Well, the king tells Ibn Fadlan that the people of Wizu, a region like a 3-month journey north of the Bulgars, they're the ones who identified the giant as belonging to Gog and Magog.
So this giant was like a real-life monster from their end-of-the-world myths.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Imagine Ibn Fadlan, who's there to introduce a new faith, encountering a being linked to these deeply held beliefs.
Yeah, that's got to be a lot to process. Did it freak him out? Did he see it as a sign or something? We're going to have to unpack all of this when we come back.
It really makes you think, how that encounter might have shaped how he approached his mission.
Yeah, that's a good point. He's introducing this new faith to people who already have these deep-seated beliefs about the world. Beliefs that include giants and Gog and Magog.
Exactly. And it wasn't just like a fringe belief. These figures, Gog and Magog, they're like central to Islamic and other Abrahamic traditions.
Right, you mentioned that before the break.
Yeah.
Can you maybe unpack that a bit? Like, who were Gog and Magog exactly?
Well, they're often depicted as these powerful, destructive forces.
Okay.
Representing chaos and like the ultimate threat to civilization.
Oh, wow.
And they're closely linked to the apocalypse, which obviously would have been a huge deal for the people Ibn Fadlan met.
Yeah, for sure. So do you think he tried to, like, reconcile these beliefs with Islamic teachings? Or did he just focus on the core message of Islam, hoping that would resonate?
That's a really good question, and unfortunately, Ibn Fadlan doesn't really say how he dealt with that challenge.
That's too bad. It would be fascinating to know.
Right. But what we do get from his writings is this glimpse into a world where these stories and beliefs were just part of everyday life.
Yeah, it wasn't just mythology to them. It was real.
Exactly. And this giant story, it really brings that home.
Totally. It reminds us that history isn't just these, like, neat little events in a textbook. It was messy and full of contradictions.
Absolutely. And intertwined with myth and legend in ways we can barely imagine.
So going back to the giant, do we have any idea where Gog and the Magog were supposed to be located? Like, was there a specific place they were thought to live?
Well, there's actually a lot of debate about the origins of Gog and Magog, both historically and geographically.
Okay.
Some scholars connect them to various historical groups like the Huns, the Mongols, or even the Vikings.
Really? Vikings again?
Yeah, there are theories connecting them to all sorts of groups, but others place them in the Caucasus Mountains or Central Asia, and they're often described as being trapped behind a giant wall or barrier.
Right, keeping them contained.
Exactly. But Ibn Fadlan's account adds this whole other layer to the mystery of their location.
How so?
Remember, he traveled north, possibly near the Arctic Circle, to this region called Wissu.
Right, where the giant was found.
Yeah, and some scholars believe his description of a sea and mountains separating Wissu from the land of the giants could point to a more northern location for Gog and Magog.
Interesting. So instead of being behind a wall somewhere far away, maybe they were in some remote, icy region.
Possibly. Maybe in Scandinavia or even further north.
That's wild. So Ibn Fadlan might have accidentally given us clues to the location of these legendary figures.
It's possible. It just adds another layer of intrigue to his story, right?
That definitely. It's like he stumbled onto a piece of a giant puzzle, this puzzle that connects history and myth and geography, and we're still trying to put it together centuries later.
And that's what's so captivating about Ibn Fadlan's writings.
Mm-hmm.
They're not just some dry travelogue. They're this window into a world where those stories were woven into the fabric of life, shaping people's beliefs, influencing how they saw the world.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, right, how those beliefs might have shaped their interactions with Ibn Fadlan himself.
Absolutely. Did they see him as a potential ally against these apocalyptic threats? Or did his arrival with this new faith create even more anxiety?
So many questions. And while we can't know for sure, it's clear that Ibn Fadlan's journey represents this amazing period of cultural exchange.
Exactly. This intersection between the Islamic world and the people of Eastern Europe and Scandinavia.
A time when these vastly different cultures were meeting and learning from each other, shaping the course of history.
And speaking of shaping history, there's another really interesting aspect of Ibn Fadlan's story that we haven't touched on yet.
What's that?
His account, it didn't just stay buried in some dusty old manuscripts.
Okay.
It actually found its way into popular culture.
Really?
It captivated a wider audience through this really exciting novel and even a Hollywood blockbuster.
Wait, are you talking about the 13th Warrior?
The one and only. It's amazing how Ibn Fadlan's 10th century journey made it onto the big screen, right?
So how did this 10th century scholar end up inspiring a Hollywood movie?
Well, it all started with a book that kind of like reintroduced Ibn Fadlan's account to modern readers.
Okay.
It's called Eaters of the Dead.
Eaters of the Dead.
And it was written by, get this, Michael Crichton.
Wait, Michael Crichton?
Yeah, the guy who wrote Jurassic Park.
Whoa, that's a pretty big jump from dinosaurs to 10th century traveler.
I know, right? But Crichton was known for, blending fact and fiction.
Right.
And he saw this amazing story in Ibn Fadlan's account.
Okay, so what's the book about?
Well, here's the twist. He framed the book as a fictional translation of this ancient manuscript,
Okay.
supposedly written by Ibn Fadlan himself.
Oh, that's clever.
Right. And while he drew a lot from Ibn Fadlan's journey and his descriptions of the Rus, he also added his own fictional elements.
Like what?
Well, in the book, Ibn Fadlan and these Viking companions, they end up battling these monstrous creatures called the Wendel.
A Wendel. What are those?
Well, it's kind of implied they're Neanderthals.
So it's like a Vikings versus cavemen thriller.
Yeah, kind of, with some historical inspiration mixed in.
And then that book was adapted into The 13th Warrior
Exactly.
with Antonio Banderas as Ibn Fadlan.
Yep. It's a big-budget Hollywood version of Crichton's book.
I remember that movie.
Yeah.
Lots of action, amazing scenery.
Yeah, it definitely captured that adventurous spirit.
But how accurate was it? Did they stay true to the real story?
Well, you know Hollywood, right?
Not always known for their historical accuracy.
Exactly. They took some liberties, especially with Ibn Fadlan's personality and motivations.
Yeah.
But, it introduced a lot of people to Ibn Fadlan and his amazing story.
And that's what matters.
Totally. It sparked curiosity, and it led people to explore the real history.
Speaking of exploring real history, what are some key takeaways you hope our listeners will get from this deep dive?
Well, first, Ibn Fadlan's account just shows us how valuable primary sources are.
Right, like hearing it straight from someone who was there.
Exactly. It gives us these incredible insights into cultures and beliefs that we might not even know about otherwise.
And secondly,
Ibn Fadlan's journey really highlights the power of cultural exchange, right?
yeah, like how these different worlds collided.
Exactly. It wasn't just about diplomacy. It was about different cultures meeting, sharing ideas, trying to understand each other.
And sometimes clashing, I imagine.
For sure. And honestly, those challenges are still so relevant today, right?
Totally.
In our globalized world, understanding different cultures is more important than ever.
Absolutely. So to our listeners, if you're intrigued by what you've heard today, go explore more.
Yeah, read Ibn Fadlan's account for yourself.
Dive deeper into those cultures he encountered.
And think about what his story tells us about curiosity and the importance of connecting with different cultures.
Great advice. And here's something else to think about. What if Ibn Fadlan's account, with its blend of history and myth, gives us a glimpse into a world where those lines were really blurred?
Interesting. What other secrets might still be hidden in history, just waiting to be discovered?
Great question. It's something to ponder as we keep exploring the past.
Sure.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
And until next time, keep those minds curious.